1945 marked a turning point in world history. Out of the devastation of World War II, the United States emerged as the architect of a new global order, Pax Americana. Unlike old empires, America's influence was built on alliances, international institutions, and the appeal of its ideals, not direct rule. American leaders, having seen the dangers of isolationism, believed U.S. security depended on global stability. They set out to create a world where democracy and capitalism could thrive, convinced these were the keys to lasting peace. At Bretton Woods, the U.S. led the creation of the IMF and World Bank, anchoring the global economy to the dollar and preventing the chaos that had fueled past conflicts. This system was a blend of self-interest and idealism. By fostering stability abroad, America opened new markets and gained reliable allies. The logic was simple. America's prosperity was tied to the world's. For the next 75 years, this grand strategy shaped the lives of billions, even those who never set foot on American soil. Pax Americana was not just about preventing war, it was about building a world order with the U.S. at its center. The American-led peace would define international relations for generations. The tools of American leadership. To build this new order, the U.S. launched the Marshall Plan, pouring billions into Europe to rebuild economies and prevent the spread of communism. This was strategic investment, not charity, reviving allies and former enemies alike. The U.S. also forged military alliances like NATO, extending its security umbrella over Western Europe and later, Asia. These alliances provided the stability needed for economic recovery and growth. American culture became a global force. Hollywood, jazz, and consumer brands exported not just products but the idea of freedom and opportunity. The U.S. economic model, free enterprise open markets, became the blueprint for prosperity. American corporations like Coca-Cola and IBM became global icons, spreading business practices and lifestyles worldwide. This integration pulled nations into the American orbit, making the U.S.-led order the default for modernization. Through money, might, and culture, America's influence became pervasive, an invitation, not a command. The world was remade in the image of American leadership. America at the apex. The Cold War's end left the U.S. as the world's sole superpower, its unipolar moment. American military, economic, and cultural dominance reached unprecedented heights. The U.S. led coalitions in conflicts like the Gulf War, enforced a new world order, and expanded NATO deep into former Soviet territory. The Washington Consensus spread free market reforms worldwide, fueling globalization and lifting millions from poverty. Democracy and capitalism seemed inevitable, and the American model was seen as the universal path to success. For a brief period, it appeared the U.S. had established a durable global order based on its own values. Pax Americana was at its zenith, promising peace and prosperity to all who joined. Strains on the American order. But no system lasts forever. The 9/11 attacks exposed America's vulnerability, and the costly wars in Afghanistan and Iraq eroded its moral authority. The 2008 financial crisis, born in the U.S., shook global confidence in the American economic model. Allies and rivals alike questioned whether the U.S. was still a reliable leader. At home, political polarization and economic discontent made it harder for America to project a clear vision abroad. Rising debt and internal divisions raised doubts about the sustainability of U.S. commitments. The image of a competent, benevolent leader faded, replaced by perceptions of overreach and instability. The cracks in Pax Americana were now impossible to ignore. Allies in shifting sands. As America's foundations weakened, allies grew uneasy. The Iraq War and financial crisis shook their faith in U.S. leadership. Shifts in American policy, like the pivot to Asia and America First, left partners feeling neglected or even threatened. In response, allies invested in their own defense and sought greater autonomy. European leaders spoke of taking their fate into their own hands, no longer assuming America would always lead. Across the developing world, the appeal of the American model faded, while China's state-led capitalism gained traction. Political turmoil in Washington made U.S. democracy look less exemplary. Countries began seeking new partners and building networks outside the American orbit. The world's center of gravity was shifting, and U.S. dominance no longer seemed assured. New challengers emerge. As American leadership faltered, new powers rose. Russia, under Putin, used force and disruption to reclaim influence, annexing Crimea, invading Ukraine, and sowing discord in the West. China's rise was even more profound, combining authoritarian control with economic dynamism to lift millions from poverty. The Beijing Consensus offered an alternative to Western democracy, appealing to many developing nations. Both Russia and China built new institutions, like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS, to bypass the US-led system. These efforts created a parallel international order, where Washington no longer wrote all the rules. The world was becoming multipolar, with power and influence more widely distributed. American dominance was no longer the unquestioned reality. Navigating the future. The world is entering a new era, one where US power is still formidable, but no longer singular. China's Belt and Road Initiative is building a new network of influence, challenging America's alliances. Countries now navigate a more fluid, unpredictable landscape, choosing partners à la carte rather than aligning with a single power. This shift brings both risks and opportunities. Smaller nations can leverage great power competition, but global cooperation is harder to achieve. Challenges like climate change and pandemics demand collaboration, yet nationalism and rivalry make it elusive. The post-1945 American framework is weakening, and the world must build something new. The transition away from Pax Americana will define the 21st century. The stakes for peace, prosperity, and the shape of the future could not be higher, beyond a bipolar past. For decades, the landscape of global politics was fundamentally defined by a singular, overarching rivalry. This was the intense ideological struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union, a period marked by tension and proxy conflicts. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the world then transitioned into an era of America's seemingly unchallenged dominance, a unipolar moment. But that era, defined by clear hierarchies and a single dominant power, is definitively over. Today, power is no longer concentrated in just a few hands. It is dispersed among many nations, each with its own agenda and capabilities. The meteoric rise of China is undoubtedly a significant part of this evolving story, but it's far from the complete picture. India, now recognized as the world's most populous country, is rapidly ascending on the global stage. India is carefully pursuing its own unique path, balancing its ties with both the West, seeking cooperation and partnership. Simultaneously, India maintains relations with rivals like China and Russia, navigating a complex web of alliances and strategic interests. The European Union, once often perceived as slow-moving and bureaucratic, is now acting with a newfound sense of unity and purpose, taking decisive action on critical issues ranging from sanctions against aggressors to ambitious climate policy initiatives. Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE, are increasingly asserting themselves on the world stage, leveraging their considerable wealth and resources to independently shape regional and global affairs, pursuing their own strategic objectives. A multitude of regional powers, Turkey, Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa, are demanding a greater voice in international forums and actively building their own networks of influence and cooperation. This phenomenon is often referred to as the rise of the rest, a messy, complex, and often unpredictable redistribution of power across the globe. The old, simplistic narrative of a world dominated by one or two superpowers is definitively gone, replaced by something far more intricate. The world is now a vibrant mosaic of competing ambitions, diverse interests, and shifting alliances. The very fabric of the global order is being actively rewritten before our eyes in real time. Countries are no longer content to be passive followers or mere spectators. They are now active and assertive players, actively participating in shaping the rules of the game. The age of one or two dominant superpowers dictating global affairs is firmly relegated to history. The future undoubtedly belongs to those nations and leaders who can skillfully navigate this new era of complexity, uncertainty, and constant change. Welcome, then, to the era of many, where power is diffuse and the future is unwritten. The new geometry of power. The world is no longer neatly divided. The old order is fading, giving way to a more complex and fluid arrangement. Experts call this new landscape multipolarity, a world with multiple centers of power, where influence is distributed among various nations and regions, rather than concentrated in a single dominant superpower. Alliances are now flexible and overlapping, not rigid and defined by ideology like during the Cold War. Countries are forming partnerships based on specific interests and shared goals. BRICS has expanded, welcoming new members and solidifying its position. This expansion is giving emerging economies a stronger platform to push for reforms in global governance and challenge the existing international order. These nations are working together to coordinate on global issues, seeking to amplify their collective voice on the world stage. The Quad and AUKUS show how countries hedge their bets in this evolving landscape. They are joining different groups for different goals, creating a complex web of relationships. Nations can cooperate with one rival on climate, finding common ground in addressing shared challenges. They can simultaneously compete on technology, striving for innovation and dominance in key sectors. And they can align with another on security, forging partnerships to address specific threats, all at once. This web of interests gives middle powers more agency than ever, allowing them to play a more prominent role in shaping global affairs. The new geometry of power is dynamic, unpredictable, and constantly shifting. It demands nimble diplomacy, requiring countries to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. In this world, no one is forced to pick just one side, allowing for greater flexibility and strategic maneuvering. Technology, trade, and tribalism. Geopolitical competition now shapes technology and trade. The US and China are locked in a tech rivalry, leading to export controls and efforts to build separate tech ecosystems. Countries and companies must choose between American and Chinese platforms, decisions that are now deeply political. The internet is fragmenting, with different rules and standards emerging. Supply chains are being rethought. Reshoring and friendshoring are replacing pure efficiency. Governments want critical goods closer to home or in friendly hands. Economic logic is giving way to geopolitics and trust. The world's wiring is being redrawn. Risks and opportunities. Multipolarity brings both risks and opportunities. More powerful players mean more chances for miscalculation and conflict. Global challenges, climate, pandemics, nuclear threats, are harder to solve without trust and cooperation. Yet, developing nations now have a stronger voice and more options. Blocs like the African Union and expanded BRICS give the Global South leverage on debt, development, and more. A multipolar world could foster innovation and balance, forcing powers to negotiate and compromise. The future could be more chaotic or more democratic and pluralistic. Much depends on how leaders and citizens respond. A world in transition. We are living through a profound global transition, a period of immense change and transformation that is reshaping our world in fundamental ways. The familiar landmarks of the past are fading, and we find ourselves navigating uncharted waters. The old rulebook is gone. Many of the established norms and conventions that once governed international relations and domestic policies are now obsolete, but the new one isn't written yet. We are in a liminal space, a time of uncertainty and ambiguity as we collectively try to define the future. No single country sets the agenda. The era of unilateral dominance is over. Power is up for negotiation. Influence is shifting, and new actors are emerging on the global stage, demanding a seat at the table. Governments must adapt. They must be agile and responsive to the rapidly changing environment, build new coalitions, and manage complex relationships. Cooperation and collaboration are essential for addressing the challenges of our time. For ordinary people, this means both uncertainty and new opportunities. The future is not predetermined, and individuals have the power to shape their own destinies. A rising global middle class is demanding dignity and a voice. They are seeking greater economic security, political participation, and social justice. The outcome isn't predetermined. This journey could lead to conflict or a more equitable order. The choices we make today will determine which path we take. The choices we make now will shape the world for generations. Our actions today will have profound consequences for the future of humanity. We are all part of this story. The world ahead will look nothing like the one we left behind. It will be a world of unprecedented challenges and opportunities, a world that demands our collective wisdom and courage.